here tonight, and it'll go on YouTube and get out, and people will hopefully learn about that. So that's my hope. Well, why don't I go ahead and get started, since we're past the time to get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kevin Ahern, and I am the Director for Undergraduate Research. And so I am providing a series of workshops to students this term involving undergraduate research. Last week, as I said, I gave one on how to get involved in undergraduate research. I didn't have a video camera at that one, unfortunately, so that means I will redo that workshop probably in about 2 weeks, and I will videotape that one. I know there's a lot of interest. Like I said, I filled Gilfillan auditorium with that one, so that tells me that there's a lot of interest in people, and those were a pretty diverse group of students that were out there for that. So welcome. How you doing? Here's the handout for you. If you don't already have one, have a seat. Yeah. So let me just explain a little bit of background to you. What a URISC application is. Most of you probably know, but some of you may not know what a URISC is. So URISC program, URISC stands for Undergraduate Research, Innovation, Scholarship, and Creativity. It's funded by the OSU Research Office, and it is a program that works both during the school year and during the summer. It requires a student, to have a mentor in order to apply. Now, to go through the workshop tonight, you don't need to have a mentor. And I've been encouraging students to come and listen to the workshop even if you don't have a mentor, because that way when you get a mentor, you can tell the mentor, hey, I know how to fill out a URISC. And for some mentors, that's going to be a nice deciding factor for you. So I hope this is helpful to you. I'm always available to help you. So part of my job is to make sure in every way possible I can expand the undergraduate research opportunities available on this campus. So if that means I can help you with this, if it means I can help you get research, whatever that means, I want to help. Okay, so that's part of my job now, and that's a pretty challenging part of my job, but I will tell you it's a wonderful part because I get to work with all of you guys, and that's always a lot of fun. Okay, so I should also say before I go further that there are 2 URISC programs. Okay, there's one that's a standard URISC, and that is available to all students in any major and at any level: freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Post-bacs, in fact, just before the thing, I had a question from a post-bac student. Do post-bacs qualify? And the answer is no, they don't. So you're not competing with post-bac students. This is only for undergraduate students. Okay, that's one program. The other program is called URISC Start, and it's a program that is very similar to this one. It is, however, only for freshmen, sophomores, and recent transfers. Welcome. How you guys doing? I got a couple handouts here for you. Okay, cool. Oh, I'm sorry. So URISC Start, so the URISC, there are different deadlines. Right now there's a deadline coming up for URISC. That's November the 5th. That's the general program that's open to anybody and everybody. Okay. The URISC Start program, as I said, which is for freshmen and sophomores, doesn't have a deadline yet, but it's probably going to be sometime in January. And of the 2, the URISC Start has had a very slow start. And that's partly because freshmen and sophomores don't get out as much as juniors and seniors do doing research. So if you are a freshman or sophomore, you can apply for the URISC, but I think your chances are going to be much better with URISC Start, simply because the numbers have been low there. They may be going up, but numbers have been low in URISC Start. Yes?
Say we apply for, we're both recent transfer students.
Great.
If we apply and get URISC, can we also apply for URISC Start later and be eligible for that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say, and that's actually backwards of the way that they envision it. So his question was, if we're transfer students, and if we apply for URISC and get that, can we later apply for URISC Start? I would say probably not. It's much more likely that you would be able to apply for URISC Start and get funded and then get URISC. So URISC won't fund you more than once during a school year. Okay? You can, and they've changed this, you can in fact get funding in the summer if you've previously had an academic year funding. Okay? URISC Start, the rules are a little less clear in that respect. But I would say if you've had a URISC, that you would not be competitive for a URISC Start after that, no. And if you're a recent transfer, probably, let's say you got a URISC, you would be ineligible by the time your URISC ran out anyway. Okay, so yeah.
And I know you said freshman, sophomore,
yes.
technically on junior standing?
Yeah, it's not standing.
Okay.
So when you go to apply, that I'll be honest with you, I sit on these committees. It's hard sometimes to know because students always like to say, oh, I got many credit hours, I got this, and and so forth. And I think it's much more informative if you tell the committee, this is my 3rd year of college. I think undergrads are just way too obsessed with how many credits they've got. And the reality is, very few people graduate in less than 4 years. And if you say, I'm in 2nd year, and I've got 180 credits, which some people have in the 2nd year, that's, say your 2nd year, because otherwise I'm going to look at you like you're a senior and you're graduating, and I'm not going to fund you, seriously, I mean, that's an important consideration. So if I could get that out of the undergraduate lingo, what I am credit-wise, I think we'd all be better. So, okay. All right. So we got 2 different types of URISC programs. All right. Now, as I said, first steps are you need to connect with a faculty member who's willing to be your mentor. As I said, I will be giving another workshop on that in about 2 weeks, and that'll be announced through advisors. And if you look on this sheet that I handed you out, there's a listserv. And I strongly encourage you to get on the listserv because I make all announcements relative to undergraduate research through the listserv. Okay? Now, it's a little misleading. It says go to that thing and enter that name. You have to follow the instructions after you enter the name. Okay? I've had a few students I think thought they were on. All they did was enter the name. They didn't do anything else. So you have to follow the instructions after you enter the name. Okay. But I do make all announcements about workshops. I've made several announcements regarding financial opportunities for students, internships, national, and we'll also announce international, anything else like that. Sometimes professors will say, hey, can you find me a student doing blah, blah, blah? It'll go on the listserv. Okay, so all those things will be announced through the listserv. So I will announce the other workshop, or the workshop coming up through that listserv. For anybody here pre-med? Okay, so for pre-med students, this isn't relevant for research, but next Thursday night I'm doing a workshop entitled How to Ace Your Pre-Med Interview, okay? And if you haven't gotten that notice, it's going to be in Gilfillan Auditorium at 7:30, and you're shaking your head, you must have gotten it, Kat, okay. So you're on the pre-med listserv? Okay, good. I'm glad they got that out, because I asked them to please put that out there, and it took them a while to get that out. All right, now, the application that you're going to see, I'm going to step you through the application step by step. The application that you'll see here tonight comes from this website right here, and I will make all this presentation available as a PDF that you can download. So again, if you're on the listserv, by tomorrow, I will announce on the listserv, here's how you can get the PDF, and you can see everything that I've got on here. So you don't even need to write all this stuff down. Okay? All right. So here's what it looks like. So I decided our president would be a good person to put applying for a URISC. So Ed's a great guy anyway, so I think he would enjoy this. So student name, Ed Ray, and his major is business administration. And he's a member of the Honors College. Okay. Now, you'll notice when you get to the thing, that thing has little gray boxes. I couldn't get the X to go inside the box. Okay, and just do what I did. In fact, what I would probably do is just put the X by a yes, and I would just delete all of this over here. So it's clear that it's not X going there or X going there. Okay, so just make sure it's clear. They don't really care, but I mean, as long as you're clear what that is there. Okay, Honors College, yes or no? Mailing address, where you're from. These are all pretty straightforward things. Phone, email, expected date of graduation. And that can be helpful in terms of determining what year you are, but I would still explicitly put what year you are on your application. And your current GPA. Okay. Yeah?
GPA, do you want total cumulative or in like OSU?
Good question. Generally, people are going to want your OSU GPA. Okay? And so what I would do is if you've been to a couple of schools, I would put 3.44 in parentheses, I would put OSU. Okay? And it's your OSU GPA that people are going to be interested in anyway. Okay? If you put a cumulative, and the reason you don't want to put you say, okay, well, I had, a couple of years at Clackamas Community College and a year here at OSU, and my cumulative is, a 3.5, and, your OSU GPA has been 3, but your GPA at Clackamas was 4, they're going to look at that. All they're going to do is they're going to look at the OSU, and they're going to say, that's not right, So make sure you give them your OSU, and then just to be sure you put it in parentheses so they know what you're talking about. Yeah?
And obviously, for a transfer student, you just put previous institutions.
Yeah, so if you're a transfer student, that's a very good question. I would put down what your previous institution cumulative was, and again, just put in parentheses that I'm a new transfer student, no OSU GPA yet, but here's what I had, something like that. These are pretty, people understand, they're flexible. They're not rigid rules here. Okay, so good. I'm very happy that you're transfer students and you're getting started early. That's very good for both of you. Okay, project advisor. Okay, so this is going to be the person that you're working under, and project advisor will be the faculty member in charge. So a lot of times if you're working in labs, you may be working with a graduate student, you may be working with a postdoc or something like that, but the mentor is going to be the person who's the head of the lab. Okay, so make sure you put that head of the lab there, unless the head of the lab says otherwise. Okay. The reason you want that head of the lab there is the head of the lab will be known by the people in the research office. And I'm saying lab, it doesn't have to be lab research, it can be other types of research, but the head of the person, head of the project that you're working on, it needs to be a faculty member. Okay, that person's department, that person's phone number, email, the name and department of the head of this person. Okay, so that would be my department chairman right there. And then the college and name of the dean of my department is the College of Science, and that's the name of my dean. Okay, if you don't know those are available on the web. You can find those, and certainly a faculty member will be able to help you with that as well. Okay, now here's a project title. Project titles are not the most important thing, but I find that students tend to make project titles pretty clunky, okay, or too strong. So I would run a project title by your mentor. Your mentor will probably tone it down a little bit, I mean, a student title might say something like, trichloroacetate, a new way to kill cancer, okay? That would probably be a little over the top, all right? Or a new cure for cancer. So run the title by your mentor, and throughout everything I'm going to say here about the application and the place where you fill out your research description, simple is better than complex, okay? Most students want to be too complex because they see the complexity and think, oh, I've got to make sure I get all this and this in here, et cetera, et cetera. The instructions, as I'll go through them, explicitly tell you, be using common language, because not everybody who reviews these things are in the field that you're in, all right? So you may have people reviewing this who are a professor in psychology or a professor in history. And if you're writing about some very technical process in science or engineering, whoosh, you just went off their list. Okay? Now, you don't dumb it down, you don't baby it, okay? But you want to use, wherever you can, the common language in the descriptions that you're doing. Okay, so the terms that you're applying for. If you apply right now for the November 5th deadline, you can put down winter and spring, okay? And to be honest with you, that's probably what I would do, because if you apply for winter and spring, you can apply for a total of $1,500. If you only apply for winter, you can only get $1,000. Okay. Now, if you're graduating at the end of winter term, then of course that's the only term that you can apply. You have to be honest about that. That's the only time you can apply for is that winter term. Or if you're going to be gone in the spring term, then you wouldn't do that. You're going to be gone spring term.
Hatfield.
Well, Hatfield's good.
Well, I know, but I wouldn't be doing
right.
research where I am. So could I still? So I would only apply for winter if I'm going to be at Hatfield.
If you're going to be at Hatfield not working with your mentor, yeah, you would be applying only for winter term. Okay. But it's still, that means you're going to have $1,000 below in winter term. Yeah. Okay. That's good. Yeah.
I'll also be at Hatfield, but like we're doing, like what if we have completed the research part of our project by then and are doing writing or other things?
Okay, so what if you completed your research project by then and then you're doing writing or other things? I can't say definitively for this, but I would say the spirit of the URISC would be that this is to fund the work that you're doing. It's not funding things like writing a thesis and things like that. There's one place in there where they will explicitly say they don't provide funds for binding and copying of thesis and so forth. So the spirit of it is that this is what you should be working on. So even though you're going to be working on writing and so on and so forth, unless you're really working with your mentor, I think that would be inappropriate. And you wouldn't want to take a chance, for example, and say, okay, I think I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be over at Hatfield, and then they find out that you're at Hatfield, and you've said you're going to be around to do stuff. They might decide that they want the money back, So I would be safe and just say winter term. Okay, so the guidelines state that you can apply for 1, 2, or 3 terms. We're too late for the 3 terms. People getting 3 terms applied actually back last spring for this, with the summer term being a separate application. Summer term works a little bit differently. I'm not going to show you how to do a summer term application. The only difference actually has to do with the budget, and I'll mention that. But the summer term application is a little bit different in that respect. Let's see. You can't apply retroactively, so you can't apply, say, okay, I'm going to be gone spring, so I want to apply winter, and oh yeah, I did a bunch of work in the fall. Okay, maybe you did some work in the fall, but they're not going to fund it retroactively. And, all right, describe any previous undergraduate research experience that you have. So there's a box for none. And if you have any at all, I would put it on there. Okay? Now, one of the things about the URISC program, it's a little, dicey this way. One of the things about the URISC program is to encourage students to get involved in research. So part of the program really wants you to get out there and to have a new experience in research. But part of the program also is that if you've got some experience where it looks like that you know what you're getting into and you know what you're doing, I think that also helps you, okay? So it would help you to put down anything that you would put down here. So Ed here worked as a business intern throughout 2010, 2011 under my guidance. This included an independent project he designed and implemented to improve communication and business practices from the Department of Biochemistry to stakeholders in the College of Science, the OSU Foundation, and the OSU Central Administration. Now, as you will see in this application, that is a theme that carries through the application. So this is something this person has done, and now in the application I'm going to describe to you, this is something that's being carried a little bit further. So the person who's reviewing this can say, oh, this is something that this person is knowledgeable about, they've had some success with, and now they're going to go do something on top of that. And that's going to look really good to people reviewing your grant. Okay. Now, budget. This is the place where I get the most questions on the URISC proposal, okay? What can I put into the budget, all right? And this is really dumb, okay? It says round figures to the nearest dollar. Then they say OPE costs $2.43 per month. OPE stands for other payroll expenses, so I'll take you through that, okay? All right, so here we go. Refer to the guidelines for complete instructions on the use of funds. Generally, yes, you want to look through that. I don't think you're going to find it overly interesting reading, to be honest with you. There are certain things you can't apply for, and I'll show you some of those at the end. Itemize and list your budget items in detail, so that's what this little summary is here. Include quantity, item, price, and justification. So this grant is not just about getting you funds. It's very, very commonly used for that, but sometimes you may have to buy something, some supplies or something to make it work. Most labs will be set up if you're working in a lab environment, but if you're not working in a lab environment and maybe you're working, let's say, doing a photography project with somebody, okay? Maybe you would need to buy something to store the images on or something like that. That could be put onto here as an expense of part of the budget. Okay, so, but the thing you'll probably be most concerned about is student wages, okay? So you think about, well, how much do I want to pay myself, all right? This is something you'll probably need to run by the mentor, probably because you decided, okay, I'm going to pay myself $20 an hour, all right? OSU won't let you do that in the first place. But the mentor may have a limit here as well, and the reason may be that the mentor has somebody else in the lab who's getting paid, so they want everybody to be paid at the same rate, okay? So you want to be careful not to just go through the roof with this. But again, mentor, you're getting your own money, the mentor is probably going to be pretty happy with that. Yeah?
Quick question just on supplies again. I
Yeah.
know with like graduate students, when you buy supplies, that
Yep.
typically then they're the lab's equipment.
Yes.
Is that different here?
Oh, good question.
Say
So,
phthalates.
yeah. So his question was, if I have a grant and the grant buys some supplies, are those my supplies or are those the lab supplies, basically? The answer is those will be the lab supplies. And that's partly because, first of all, many of the supplies that you might buy wouldn't be appropriate to be had out of the lab, for one. And for another, the lab is providing the environment and other things for free, and so this is sort of an exchange that happens with that. So the idea of the supplies is that they would be used up during the course of your experiments generally, so that would probably be the other reason to say, no, it wouldn't be appropriate to do that, because it means, you didn't tell us enough, you bought too much, right? And so it just should stay with the lab. Okay, student wages. So I've got $10 per hour at 120 hours. How did I decide number of hours? Well, there is a limit, first of all, on how many hours you can work in a lab per week and get paid as a lab worker. If you're an undergraduate who's a U.S. citizen, I believe that's 20 hours per week. That's a maximum. I decided that this person Pat was going to put in, I put him down for 2 terms. 2 terms would correspond to 20 weeks. I'm sorry, 2 terms would correspond to roughly 20 weeks. And I figured 5 or 6 hours a week. So with that, I came up with 120 hours. And $10 per hour times that gave about $1,200. So you have to think a little bit ahead. And if you put in too much money and you don't spend it all, it goes back to them. So there's no reason to, I wouldn't put in too little, but I also wouldn't just go crazy with putting too much money in either, because that may lower your credibility in terms of if you try for other awards for something. OPE cost, that's bizarre. I don't know what the hell that means, but I left the cents on there, put down $14, and 58 cents, which was 6 months, which was 2 terms worth of work. Travel expense, okay. So there are some limits with respect to travel. Not travel for you, but there are limits for travel of people in your laboratory. So your professor couldn't use this to go traveling of an overall project. You have to keep in mind how much your total budget is here too, though, right? So you've only got a total budget of about, in this case, about $1,500 is all you can spend in 2 months. Okay, supplies, equipment, rentals, and expendables. Okay, so I did not itemize those here, but I was basically envisioning that they're going to need to do some copying and a few other things, and I put down about $200 worth of supplies and came up with a total budget of about $1,414. Okay. Matching funds. Now, matching funds are something that are, may sound a little odd. What is a matching fund? If you apply for a URISC in the summer, for example, the professor is required to supply matching funds, meaning that the professor, if you get a URISC in the summer, you can apply for up to $1,800 for the summer, and if you do that, the professor has to put up at least $1,200 in addition to that. Now, the reason for doing that is to obviously make it a little sweeter thing for you, but also to save the URISC program some money, because the professor's got some grants and so forth to spend. And matching funds can also, if the professor puts them in, make the thing look more attractive. Because when the professor puts more funds in and says, okay, well, I'm going to take what this person is going to get right here, and I'm going to add another $1,000 to that. Okay? Well, now the research office looks at this and says, wow, we're going to get more bang for our buck, because we're going to spend $1,400, but we're going to get $2,400 worth of things for the student. Was that the question you were going to ask? Or?
Quick question.
Yeah.
For summer term, what about like REUs and Sea Grant
Yep.
internships and stuff? Could you use that same research for this? Or
Okay.
not so much?
So your question is basically, his question says, if you have REUs in the summer and so forth, could you sort of combine these? I think is your question. Is that right? Yeah. It depends a little bit on the program. So most programs, you can't combine as such, no. All right? But I can tell you there's ways in which they can be combined. So I ran the HHMI program at OSU for 14 years. We just finished our last summer of it this past summer. And we liked having students getting both a URISC and an HHMI, but we didn't let students keep all the money of both. And part of that was because we wanted everybody to be paid the same. But in the URISC, students would only get $3,000. In the HHMI, they would get $4,000. So what we did is we just said, okay, here's another $1,000. We gave them the extra $1,000. So in that sense, they did combine them. That is, they had both awards and went forward. Each program is going to be different in terms of what it's willing to do. So it's something you would definitely want to check on. It doesn't hurt to apply for more than one. The consequences come when you get more than one. Then you have to decide, oh, damn, do I want to give this one up or what? You know, so that's where it comes in. Okay, but with a lot of this sort of funding can help supplement another account, or vice versa, that can help supplement this account. So, okay, so there's the funds requested, and there's the limits, as you see, 1,000 for one, 15 for two, 18 for three, and 1,800 for the summer, and that requires an additional match on the part of the professor. Summer is the only time a match is required. Yes?
Can you go back to the travel expenses? Are you saying it can support conference? You know, the rules that it can't.
It said it can't for a professor or postdoc.
It says travel screening for conferences, so students can get funded for conferences.
Well, maybe I'll come up to it. Somehow I thought that there is some travel that students are allowed to take, and I can't recall what it is. I thought it was conference.
It says travel to conduct research or visit libraries.
Ah, that's what it was. Okay. So yeah, thank you for reading that to me. I apologize. So I retract what I said. You cannot use that as an undergraduate to go to a conference, okay? But I have seen travel awards made to undergraduates to travel for various purposes. So, and those can be particularly useful for, let's say, again, going back to a photography thing. You know, I've got to do this thing, and I've got to go to New Mexico to photograph blah, blah, blah as part of my undergraduate thesis, for example. That could be an allowable expense for that. Okay? Yeah, thanks for pointing it out. Okay. Projects facilitated through the Department of the Mentor. Okay, so I'm in biochemistry, biophysics. And this is some sort of technical information about where it's going to be transferred to. This is nothing you're going to know. And in fact, in some cases, your mentor isn't going to know. All right? So it will go into, and I'll tell you briefly what these gibberish up here means. It will go into the state account of your mentor. Now, sometimes mentors don't realize they have a state account. And so when you say, what's the name of your state account, the mentor goes, I don't know. In which case, you may have to talk to the mentor to find out who's the accounting person that you talk to, because the accounting person will know that information. Okay, and that's going to be a different account, and different thing for every laboratory. I just made, well, this is actually an account I have, but I made this number up because I didn't know what that number was myself. Okay, all right, I'd have to talk to an accountant to do it. All right, so what this means is if you get a grant that's funded, then the research office is going to transfer money into this account that will be controlled by your mentor, and the mentor will disperse funds to you accordingly. So when you go and let's say you've got salary on there, you're going to fill out time cards, and then you're going to list this as the place to charge those time cards to. The mentor will sign off and say that's okay, and that's how it works. Okay. All right. Oop. There we go. All right. Regulatory compliance. Now, this is going to look real hairy and real tacky to you, okay? And I need to say a little bit about this. So this is a part of what we call the institutional, it's part of the sort of review of the whole campus for a variety of different things, ranging from safety to ethical conduct to animal use to you name it, all kinds of considerations. So when you apply, you have to go through and you have to check every one of these, yes or no, what have you done, okay? So for example, does this proposal involve the use of human subjects? And you will see I have chosen the option yes, okay? Now it might seem, well, what am I doing? Am I doing test tubes on humans? Am I taking blood on humans? I said it was business administration. What the hell am I doing, right? One of the things that students need to learn and professors need to learn, okay, is that if you are doing anything with people, right, that includes things like surveying them, which is what I'm doing here, doing a survey of people, that's considered working with human subjects. That means that you have to get what's called institutional review board approval, all right? All right? And it sounds very hairy. For most surveys, it's very straightforward, but the caveat to that is that you have to have your survey together. You have to have the whole survey, and you have to submit it to the Institutional Review Board to make sure that you are on par with their rules about working with human subjects. And there's very important reasons they do this. This is not just a bureaucratic reason that they're giving you, that they're trying to stand in your way, okay? There's some very, very big ethical concerns about working with humans, okay? Nazis, Hitler, Germany, big example. The Tuskegee syphilis circumstances in Alabama. These are the things that drive this, and we never want to be in a situation where we have that sort of thing working with humans. And so that's why these are done. So I've said yes, and I'll have a little blurb about this. Will this be a new IRB application? The answer is yes. Now, what does that mean? Well, sometimes if you're working within a project with another professor, and the professor already is, you know, working with humans, and they've already doing this, and you're asking a survey over here compared to a survey over there that they've applied for, then you would say, no, it's not a new one, but here's the current one, and then here's some more details about what we're going to do within the confines of that earlier one. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. Oh, that's not a question. Okay. Okay. So in many cases, if you're doing laboratory research here, you're probably not going to have humans involved. Okay. Probably not going to have humans involved. Is there a question?
So I guess that doesn't involve human blood. If we're doing blood or human
Yeah, if you're working with human blood or human tissues, as far as I know, and I'm not an expert in this, the answer would be no, but that would be something that if you were working with that, your mentor would know the answer to that question right off. Okay, so I would say talk to the mentor about that because they would have had to already have gotten approval if that were the case. And my suspicion is that if that were the case, the mentor would actually already have approval to do that. And then they wouldn't, then you would just say, okay, this is what the approval is already for this, and you're already set up. But again, mentor is going to have the answer to that question. Okay, and in fact, for all the things on here, the mentor is going to know that. The one place where mentors trip up is this one right here with a very simple thing like a survey. Oh, we're not involving humans, we're just doing a survey. Well, unless you're having monkeys fill out the survey, you're involving humans, okay? And that's the one place you want to be careful. And so I always make students aware of that because I've seen, I work a lot with the students in the Honors College. And I've seen, for example, students in the Honors College get tripped up working on their thesis because they're working with a mentor who doesn't realize that they have to do an IRB approval to do a survey, okay? And so all of a sudden they discover, wow, I've got to get approval, and it's going to take a few weeks to get approval, and they want to graduate next month, you know? So you got to be aware of those sorts of things in advance. The overall approval process for most surveys is quite straightforward. They promise to try to get them done in a week or two, and I've seen that if things are set up properly, they don't take too long. Okay. All right. Next, so getting past that, next question. Does this proposal involve the use of live vertebrate animals? Okay, so this is a concern about animal safety, animal welfare. We don't want to be in a situation where we are causing undue harm to animals or being unethical in our treatment of animals. Yes?
No one cares about invertebrates?
I didn't say that, but are you torturing invertebrates? I don't know. What was your comment?
I said the Animal Welfare Act doesn't.
Yeah. So, if this is yes, then you will need to get an approval of that. This is likely, again, if you're working in a lab, something that the lab already has, okay? And so you would just add it to an existing approval number that's there. This would only, in this case, come up if you had something new that you were doing with animals that the professor wasn't already doing, and that would be unusual for an undergraduate application. Okay. Does this proposal involve the use of recombinant DNA molecules, transgenic plants or animals, and/or infectious agents of these? Okay. In many cases, working in a biological sciences lab, the answer to this will actually be yes. Okay. To not use recombinant DNA technology is almost the exception. But again, that laboratory is already going to have some approval for that. You're probably going to check yes, and you're just going to have to make sure that you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's. Mentor will know all about that. That'll be one that they'll definitely know because they had to go through this themselves. Does the proposal involve sources of ionizing radiation? That is, are you using radioactivity? Some cases, yes. Again, mentor will have a license to do that. Okay, so the mentors are actually licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to use radioactivity. You will have to, if you're going to be involved in a project, go through what's called radiation safety training, and before you'll be allowed to help and participate in that. Does this proposal involve the use of chemical carcinogens? And again, mentor is going to know about that, so in this case, no. Does this proposal involve the activities of scuba diving, free diving, and/or small boating operations? That's a brand new one, and might be kind of cool to go off on some tropical trip and do some work, but answer to that one, of course, here is no. All right, so project description. Now, briefly describe the research project, including the methodologies, hypothesis, or objectives, and the role that you will have, you being the student. Summarize the scholarly and creative aspects of the project and how it will support your educational objectives. What are the expected outcomes from your research? That is, are you doing a senior thesis, an art exhibit, increase understanding of research, blah, blah. And how will you achieve these outcomes? Limit 2 pages, double-spaced, 12-point font, written for a general audience, okay? Avoiding jargon and unexplained acronyms. Okay, so what I recommend doing, of course, keep it simple, is I really recommend addressing each of those points up here in what you're writing. Okay? Now, I've done a very abbreviated thing, because I sat down last night. This is not going to be 2 pages long, and we're not going to go through all that. But I can go through and say, okay, here's the background of what we need to understand. Here's the methodology, all right? Here, this is not hypothesis-driven, but it does have objectives. Here are the objectives of what. And the role that you're going to have is doing these surveys to handle this. summarize the scholarly and creative aspects of the project, okay, scholarly, creative aspects of the project, okay, and move on. So what I said was, okay, the need to improve communications between these groups, okay, this is again tying into the thing that I talked about before, is critical. Areas impacted by poor communications include budgetary concerns, timely news items, donor recognition, that's for people who donate to the foundation, and deadline management in all aspects of the university. This background is just giving, especially it's very important for a person who might be in some other area to have an understanding about what this is about. The tendency of most students is to just jump right into what they're doing. Okay? Background's important. Background is very important. And keep background for whatever you're talking about doing understandable for people who know nothing about the project. Okay? That's very, very critical. There should be absolutely no lingo in the background. Anybody who has a college education in any field should be able to understand your background. Okay.
So what you've done would be in the form of an essay or a paper, not just written out for us.
So what I would do is I would take the same format that I've done here,
Yes.
and I would just expand it longer. Yeah. So I'm keeping this short because, like I said, I didn't have a lot of time to write this last night, and I'm trying to keep it so I don't have to read through the whole thing for everybody here. But I would say this should be about a paragraph.
Okay, so put it in paragraph.
I would put this in about a paragraph, but I would keep the headings. I would say background, and then I would say, okay,
okay.
here's how I'm going to do it. Yeah, I would just keep the same headings there. Okay. You don't have to. You don't have to. But the nice thing about this is that this looks more organized. You know, if you read this and you don't realize all of a sudden you're talking about methodology, you don't follow the connections of what's up here to what you've written down here. All right? So keep the bullet points that you're doing going through there as much as you can. Okay. Objectives. We believe that by identifying the plan, okay, so we plan to survey leadership and office staff from respective groups to identify problem areas and current communications between them and learn where current bottlenecks exist. The survey will be written using IRB-approved guidelines, there's the IRB, and will be administered at the beginning of the project. Results will be tabulated to identify problems and areas where operations are proceeding well. Problem areas will be the focus for future development. Okay? So this now is telling me what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a survey, and from this survey it's going to tell me something about where it's taking too long for this thing over here to happen compared to over here. This is working really well because they're going through on a daily basis, et cetera, so I don't need to improve or fix something that isn't broken. But the things that are broken are going to be where I'm going to be focusing my attentions. Okay? Objectives. Now, so why am I doing this? Yeah.
So with the methodology, so if you are running a more complex experiment with
Yes.
the survey, what are good ways to,
Right.
I mean, should you explain what you're doing more?
Okay.
Or just,
Very good question. So basically, how technical should that methodology be is your question, I
yeah,
think, right?
and you want everyone to be able to understand it, but at the same time, you don't want to sound
Right.
like you're dumbing it down.
That's correct. So the answer to the question is that you can't, especially in a technical application, make it completely absent of technical information because that's going to be necessary even for the people who are technically savvy to understand what's going on. So it's a challenge, and it's one of the real challenges, I think, in writing things for a general audience that has a scientific component to it. My recommendation is be general as much as you can, okay? I intend to use recombinant DNA technology to create a transgenic plant that is able to produce a protein from insects that protects it from sunlight. Okay? And that can be, so in a couple of sentences I've said that, and then you can, beneath that, say specifically, I will da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, okay? Now, it doesn't mean you have to tell every single detail of what's there, but keep it fairly general. One of the places where people make mistakes with this is the mentor is probably, if you work with a mentor is probably going to write a lot of that, okay? And that's fine. But the mentor is probably going to take something they've written for their grant, and they're going to copy and paste it out of there, and they're going to give it to you here and paste it into here, okay? That's going to be pretty tacky. And I can't tell you that those things don't get funded, because they do sometimes. But I think the harder that is for the person to get through, the reviewers to get through, the more difficult that's going to be for them to fund you. That's number one. Number two, if it's just extraordinarily tacky, they're going to have a real difficult time thinking you wrote it. Okay? So you might talk to your mentor about, well, you know, okay, I really feel like I need to make this more for a general audience. You know, do you mind if I take a stab at it, and then you can take a look at it and give me some feedback? Okay? You don't want to do anything here without talking to the mentor. Very important to keep the mentor in the loop with all this stuff. But, you know, is it okay if I do that? And then, you know, you'll do something and you'll show the mentor how that looks and give some thoughts there. Okay. Objectives. Why are we doing this? We believe that by identifying areas where current problems exist, we can directly address those issues with the design of new practices that overcome the obstacles and improve communications going in all directions involving these groups. Okay? So pretty straightforward thing. But again, we want to find where the problems are, we want to fix the problems, and go forward. Scholarly creative aspects. This is the first attempt on the OSU campus to address communications as an issue in OSU business practices. Insights gained from this study will be compiled and provide data for a longer-term publication on business practices at OSU in a peer-reviewed journal. Okay, so this is the scholarly component. We're going to get it in a peer-reviewed journal. And the novelty creative part of this is it's the first time anybody has addressed this on the campus. So kind of cool stuff. Okay, how will it support educational objectives? That was also listed in that thing above. I hope to ultimately pursue an MBA with a focus on the impact of effective communication on profits. Data I gather here will be useful for my future research efforts and will give me important training that will carry forward into my graduate work. I plan to use all work I do here to form the basis of my UHC thesis. And yes, that is perfectly acceptable to say. Okay, perfectly acceptable to say that. Expected outcomes. So here's why I said why it was important. Here's why it's educationally important. And now here's the results of all the stuff that's going to happen if this all works out. The results should result in improved communications. Obviously, if that's what you set out to do, I hope it's what you get out in the end, right? Between these groups here that you set out to, I expect that findings with this one department will be broadly applicable across the campus and may have significant benefit for many departments and colleges. So what this now, the person who's reviewing this thinks, it's kind of like the matching funds, right? We're going to fund a little bit here that's going to do something, but this might actually benefit the whole campus in some way. It's another way of stretching dollars, okay? Really good if you can incorporate something like that into your proposal. Synergy. What aspects of your research project will enhance the collaborative learning between you and your faculty project advisor? What are the leveraging opportunities for further research? In other words, will the research project lead to further scholarly, professional, or creative opportunities for either you and or your faculty project advisor? Or is the research being used as a mechanism to fund a project, like a senior thesis, for example? Okay? So, enhancing collaborative learning, all right? My project mentor has been at OSU for over 30 years and is intimately involved. He has an understanding both of the business practices and has a tremendous amount of experience in communications. I expect to draw on his expertise to learn how things have been done historically in the department and use that information. So, basically, you are collaborating with your mentor, who's been here for a long time, or this person is, been here for a long time. He knows how things work, knows how things doesn't work. So in addition to my survey, this is going to be something that's going to help because I can find out what's something that doesn't work. I'm not going to waste my time on doing it, right? Okay, leveraging. Leveraging is really important in a grant. Leveraging is what I described to you earlier, taking something and making it expand. You can take something that's useful here in one place and now it goes in other ways. Leveraging is also possible with matching funds, okay? Because again, they're seeing I'm putting $1,400 in here, but this professor's adding $1,000, so I'm effectively getting $2,400 worth of effort for this. This is levers. Levers give you additional ways of using your strength to do things. So here's the leveraging. We've been in communication with 4 other departments in the College of Science, all of which have indicated a strong interest in applying the results of our findings. We expect other departments may find these results beneficial as well. Okay? Thus, the work here is essentially a prototype of a plan that may have implications across the campus, thus stretching a modest amount of money requested here greatly. Magic words for a review committee. Okay? My mentor plans to use data and experiences compiled in this work for a peer-reviewed publication, again, leveraging this into something that's very useful now for the mentor. So this is benefiting me. It's going to help me with the thesis. It may be good for the campus. It's good for my mentor. The beauty about being able to make up a proposal is that you can put all those in there just with a little imagination. And sometimes you'll find that hard to do when you go to put together your proposal. Okay, student's resume include academic major, current academic standing, expected date of graduation, and GPA. I just did a little blurb here. I would recommend that you probably put together about a one-page resume that will have a little bit of your background, maybe your career goals, and of course all the information that they request. Transcript, if you're a transfer student, as you guys are, and you don't have OSU transcripts, I would certainly include the transcripts of places where you have been. If you are an OSU student, you're obviously OSU students, but if you have an OSU transcript as well, a lot of times that'll appear on there already, and so you can just submit your OSU transcript and it'll have everything. Okay, letter of support from the faculty project advisor. This is important, okay? And faculty mentors know this, and they write pretty good letters for this, okay? So, as the faculty mentor of this project, I wish to state that Ed Ray is an outstanding young man with a strong interest in communications relating to business administration. He has done a great deal of this project himself, and the innovative idea of identifying communication problems as a tool to improving the efficiency of business practices is novel and noteworthy. As such, it coincides nicely with my own work of problem identification in college administration. I believe it has a high likelihood of success, and further that will advance the student's goals of obtaining a graduate degree in business communications. So again, the mentor is no dummy. He's going to echo what you have wanted to do and how this is going to jive with him. And this is an important thing where he's talking about how the students' interests are working very much with the kinds of things that I typically do anyway. So this is a good match. All right.
How long should that be? Should we, if they want?
That doesn't need to be too long, okay? I would say about what I've written here, maybe slightly longer would be about right, but it doesn't need to be very much. It doesn't take the professor too long to really state your case, okay? Now, the last thing I did not fill in, but this is the place where if you're doing a survey, you would include the questions that you're going to ask and the questions that you're submitting to IRB for approval, okay? So that's the one place where an appendix is not needed. However, if it involves survey research, a copy of the study instrument means what's the questions that you're asking, must be provided in the appendix, and that's required. Okay? So this means if you're doing a survey project, you need to plan this in advance and have that survey laid out. And believe me, writing a survey is not as easy as you might think it is. Yes?
Do you have a sensory screen in that for like sensory science?
Ooh, you know, I would think it would, yes. Okay? But I think that would be a very simple survey. Right. But I would wager to say that yes, that would a survey regarding the tasting of something in food science would in fact go in that category. Yeah. Okay. All right. Signatures, blah blah. Faculty advisor. Notice that the department head must sign that also. So one of the things you find is sometimes rounding up signatures is a challenge. So if you wait to the very last hour of the last day when the thing is due, getting the mentor and getting the department chair to sign can be a pain. Sometimes the department chair may want to read through the proposal, so you've got to be courteous in these. And so I recommend getting them done a few days in advance. If the chair is out of town, they will almost always have somebody behind who's left authorized to sign things, and your mentor will know about that.
So you mean if the advisor is?
If the advisor is the department head, then it's both in one. But what I'm saying is that as long as you leave a couple of days, even if the chair is gone, there'll be somebody authorized to sign in the chair's absence. But your mentor will know who that is.
Is Walters in the department head of environmental science?
Well, he was, but last I heard, I thought Larry Becker now is the chair of environmental sciences, I believe. In any event, so general considerations. First of all, eligibility: full-time undergraduates under the mentorship of tenure-track faculty, assistant, associate, full professor. I'm a senior instructor. If you wanted to have me as your mentor for a URISC application, I couldn't do it. Okay, so these are assistant, associate, full professor need to be the mentor. 2, it focuses mostly on students having their first experience. Okay, mostly on students having their first experience. But again, some experience that you've had that might contribute to that would be useful to discuss. $1,000 maximum for 1 term, $1,500 for 2, $1,800 for 3. Faculty matching funds required for summer. So I've said all these before. Unspent money at the end of the term cannot be carried over. That is, well, I didn't spend it all this term. Can I spend it next term? They will not let you do that. The money is to be returned if it is not used. Okay. Now, budget considerations. It's okay to approve student salaries, wages, stipends, travel to do research, and there you were exactly right there. Library costs, equipment rental, expendable materials, supplies. It is not okay to propose these kinds of travel, equipment, including computers. Costs, you can't do this and get yourself a laptop, right? It'd be kind of nice. You can't propose costs of thesis binding preparation, travel-related expenses of attending meetings and conferences. Okay. All right. Now, there's a submission checklist, things you need to make sure that are included in your application when you go to submit it. You have one original, and that needs to be single-sided, and 3 copies, which are double-sided. Okay. So I don't know why they do that, but so there's a total of 4 copies, 1 original that's single-sided and 3 that are double-sided. What you would usually do is get 1 copy signed by you, the mentor, and the chair, and then the copies would include that already pre-signed thing. That'd be fine. Photocopies, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The original should be linked with the student's resume, with the student's transcript, the faculty support letter. So that faculty support letter was actually in the application itself, so that's there. And an appendix, which is required for survey research. The appendix, if you don't have an appendix, if you got it removed, I don't know. If you don't have an appendix to your proposal, it's a joke. Somebody laughed. Okay.
Transcript.
Yes.
I think I read the unofficial was okay.
Unofficial's okay. Unofficial's okay. And you deliver the entire package to A312, the career admin building, that's the research office, by 5 p.m. of the deadline day. The current deadline is November 5th for the current URISC application. And notice number 4, incomplete packets will not be considered. Okay. So if you leave something out, they're just going to let it sit and fester, and you'll find out about it too late that it's no good. So another good reason not to wait till the last minute. Because people make mistakes and forget something at the last minute, and that's not a good idea. Okay, so and all these things I'm showing you here, I'm taking directly off of the application. So this isn't even my wording, this is their wording. The URISC advisory panel is composed of faculty members appointed by the Vice President for Research who represent the diversity of the university's research enterprise. Proposals that describe the research to the general audience, providing clear explanations of the purpose, importance, and methodologies of the proposed topic. And you notice I highlighted here, avoiding the use of jargon and unexplained acronyms will fare better than those written to reviewers from a highly focused, disciplined perspective. That's a fancy way of saying if the professor is copying and pasting from the grant proposal, this probably isn't going to do you any favor. Okay, so make sure that, and I will also tell you from having reviewed many proposals, and I don't actually sit on the URISC one. I sit on the URISC Start one, but they're very similar applications. From reading those proposals, the people can usually tell if a student has written them or not. And I will tell you that faculty tend to be more sympathetic to proposals that are written by students than something that the professor just basically wrote and dumped in there. Okay, so useful to have it in your own words. Student impact. All right, with the funding of this project, so these are considerations now of the reviewers. They want to have maximum student impact, right? So the questions they will be asking, will funding create a professional experience for the student that might not otherwise be accessible? Okay? You can't, work with this professor to do, in case Andy Blaustein, amphibian research, and you want to go into graduate school doing amphibian, working on amphibian biology or something. This would give you a unique opportunity to do that. It'd be really good to have that in your application. What educational experiential benefits will the student gain? That was that section that I talked about, where the educational component was. Will the proposed activity significantly expand or diversify the student's artistic or scholarly base? And again, you've had not a lot of experience, but you're going to get a lot of experience with this professor over the next 2 terms. This could really benefit you in the long term. Will the project create opportunities to continue the research scholarly experience for the student beyond the URISC funding period? This is actually where matching funds could come in. The professor could say, okay, that I want to hire, get this student URISC funds to get them trained for a couple of terms, and then I plan to pay them over the summer. Oh yeah, that's really golden again, because it's stretching dollars in a different way. Will the project help position the student to pursue further scholarly, professional, creative opportunities? For example, graduate school, okay? Really, really good thing, okay? And is the resume well prepared? Okay, so make sure your resume is attractive. Students worry a lot about resume, and in the sciences, I think one of the things that you will see is that resumes aren't as rigid in terms of structure as they will be in the business world. So the actual structure isn't important as long as it's visually attractive and it has the essential information in it. I think you're in pretty good shape. Okay? And let's see. Scholarly merit. Does the proposal provide a clear statement of the overall project, hypothesis, or objective? Okay, so you notice mine had an objective. It didn't have a hypothesis. Not all projects will be hypothesis driven, and mine wasn't. But if you have a central hypothesis, that would be something you want to make sure that you clearly articulated what it was. Does the proposal provide a clear statement of the student's role? Okay. Does the proposal provide independent research study for the student? Okay. Is the student going to be twisting knobs on a thing they don't know what they're doing? Or is the student going to be developing a new method that they're playing an intimate role in that process? Very different kinds of projects. Are the proposed methods appropriate and accurate? Okay. That's something that will have to be decided by somebody on the panel who's an expert. Okay. This is why some of the things are going to have to be kind of technical so that you address that, and that person who's the expert is going to tell the history professor, you know, this is something that's done all the time, this is going to work, but you have to tell them enough about what you're going to do for that scientist on that panel to make that decision. A history professor might say, oh yeah, well we do library work all the time, so this is the appropriate way for us to determine the answer to this question that they've asked. So the different faculty will have different expertise and will contribute to answering that question right there. Does the proposal provide clear and specific budget information? Okay, that one's kind of hard not to, but you want to make sure that you go through and explain anything that's on there. And is the text of the proposal well written? I will tell you, okay, that writing is critical. Absolutely critical. And people hear this all the time, and most undergraduates at some point discover that they don't write very well the hard way. Okay? Okay? Work on your writing. Work on your writing. Work on your writing. I can tell you proposals fail just because of crap that students write. Okay? And it's, I mean, I know you kind of giggle nervously, but that's a fact of life. And it's a sad fact of life, because I know some very bright students who can't express themselves in written word. They may be able to get up and talk brilliantly, but when they try to write, they can't write. And that's something that's going to be limiting for you along the way. So my advice to students is always, always take more writing than you want to when you're in undergrad, because it will pile up on you as you go further along if you don't get those skills when you're in undergrad. And we haven't emphasized those for students enough, so that's very important to get out there. Okay, other considerations, transcript and GPA. GPA is considered, and so if you have a real low GPA, then you may want to try to give some explanation about what's going on there. Okay, I won't say that will sway people, but in some cases it may. You know, you had cancer, you were we're laughing about cancer now. Here we go. Anyway, no, but seriously, I mean, students may have health problems, or may have had some really bad term where there was a factor, and they can point to the fact that, since they've gotten through this or whatever, that their grades have been very strong, and those can sway reviewers sometimes. Will the proposed work help the student or faculty project advisor establish new extramural funding? So extramural funding meaning funding from somewhere else. And what you'll find is that some mentors actually really like URISC funds, because now they get a new set of hands in the lab. They can try an idea the professor has been too busy to do himself or herself. And this new idea might turn out to be something that actually could lead to a bigger and better grant. So again, stretching those dollars, that's really critical. Okay, important notes. These are mine now. Any publications made possible are required to cite URISC. I'm sorry, these are not mine. Required to cite URISC support. So if your work leads to a scientific publication or other type of a scholarly reviewed publication, then make sure you note that the funding came from the URISC award. That's pretty much standard. These projects require a final report to be submitted by the student. Okay? If the student does not submit a final report, the lab will be in trouble. And you will make a big enemy with the professor if you do not submit a final report. Okay? Very, very critical thing. And you don't want to have that professor be your enemy, because that professor is going to be your friend writing letters for you and various things forward. So make sure that final report is in, and there's a deadline for that report as well.
What kind of report is that? Do you know, is it a poster? Is it a presentation? Is it?
There is, it's I recall, and I haven't seen these, but I believe they're a written report that's a written summary, probably 1 or 2 pages of what you did, what your findings were, and so forth. But don't quote me on that because I honestly don't know the answer to that question. But I believe it's a fairly short report, and there is a deadline for that also. Award recipients are required to submit a final report at the end of the term. Okay, this report will be posted on the Research Office website and will be archived such that future applicants and awardees will be able to access it as a source of reference. This can actually be in a sticking point sometimes for some professors working on a process that might be patentable, and they're worried about it getting out. I believe the Research Office will work with them in that case. I've at least seen some reference to that in the application. But again, you might want to talk about that with the professor before you get too far involved in something that's patentable or of concern. All right. There's the progress report. The final report should contain the following points, blah, blah, blah. How were the funds expended? Brief summary of the work. State the benefits of the award. And submit electronically to Debbie Delmore, blah, blah, blah. Recipients who fail to submit the required final report will be ineligible to receive future funding from the Research Office incentive programs. That's specifically you, but it may jeopardize your professor's ability to get things. That's why I say you want to make sure you get these things done. You stay on the right side of the professor. And that is it. Now, I took a little bit over an hour, but I hope that's helpful. You guys have been asking good questions through it. I would like to ask if there's other questions that you have in general about the process that I can elaborate for you. Yes?
I think you might have hinted at this already, but as a committee member, what are the most common mistakes that you've seen that have caused proposals to be denied? Okay,
So what's the most common problem that I would see in a proposal that would give it a lower ranking is basically what you're asking. I can only speak for myself, and one of the things you'll see in evaluating these is we do have certain guidelines that we use to evaluate those. But even with that, there are things that you read and you say, So for example, I will look very carefully at wording and spelling. Writing really does matter, okay? Because my feeling is I should not be rewarding a student for not being careful in what they've done. Because if they're not being careful in what they're writing, then they may not be careful in what their work is, and they need to take that seriously. So I see this as a professional component that's critical. All right. So I read proposals pretty carefully for that sort of thing. Okay, that's one. That may just be me. Okay. Certainly, if there's any technical errors in there, which there usually are not, but if there's any technical errors that I see in the proposal, I, again, worry about that for the same reason, that this is a pretty important thing that you're proposing to do, and if you're not getting it right in what you have to say, that's going to be a problem, okay? I've seen other things that are just simply technical. So we had a couple in the last round last year where people proposed too much money. They asked for the limit on the one we were doing. I think the limit was about $1,500 or $2,000, something like that. URISC starts a little bit different, and they put in a proposal for $3,000. It's like, can you not read the instructions? And the thing is, you see on these is the mentor has to sign up on these too. So it slipped all the way through, and it's like that wasn't good. I'll tell you that most of the proposals I look at, it's pretty hard to make a decision. It is. And that's because you want to have, well, I'll tell you something else that I think about too. I do tend to err on the side where I think the student has written more of it, and I give the student more latitude where that's the case than I will give something that I think came from a faculty member. If I see something that looked like it was pretty much written by a faculty member and it didn't have a strong student component, I'm going to look at that differently than one that I think, well, it's pretty clear this student wrote this thing. Okay. So students are going to have less rigor in their writing. They're going to have a different style of writing than a professor is going to have, and that's going to be obvious. So those are the things that come to my mind.
If you had paid lab experience.
Yep.
So currently I'm getting paid to work in the lab, but for the most part I'm doing dishes.
Yeah.
Does that help or hurt getting a URISC where you would?
Yeah. So the question is, if I've worked in a lab doing dishes and now I want to do research, is that going to hurt or help me? If I can only speak for myself. If I were reading your application, I think that would help you immensely. Okay? Because what it's doing is you've put your time in, so you've been working in the lab doing stuff, and now here's a new opportunity for you to do something. Okay, so you see this growth, and you see this. There was this thing in this section in there where it said something about a new opportunity for a student that didn't exist before. Bingo. I mean, that just hit it right on the head. So I would mention that in my application.
Yeah.
You know, I've been working, you know, in Dr. Blaustein's lab, preparing glassware, doing, you know, support for graduate students and so forth. This is my first chance to have my own project. Oh, yeah, that sounds great to me. If you don't get funded, then don't blame me, but that sounds good to me. Yeah. Yes? What if you are already working for the professor that you want to apply with for a URISC? I don't see any problem at all with that. It's not at all uncommon that we'll have students who have been working with the professor for a while who will apply and get funded for URISC. Yeah. So I would encourage you definitely. Yeah. So the summer application is pretty much the same as far as I know, as far as I recall. I didn't check to see if there was a difference. The only difference is the requirement of the match. So the matching funds, the professor has to come up with a match to bring it up to $3,000 for summer. Okay. I shouldn't say up to $3,000. They have to provide 40% of the total funding. Usually that works out to $3,000, but for summer? It's too early right now. We're just, we are having application right now for winter and spring. Summer applications typically are out in January, February, and they're usually due in about March. Yeah. And again, if you get on the listserv, you'll get notices whenever those things become available. People get tired of me telling them to get on the listserv, but that listserv is important. Yes?
So what do you recommend for freshmen
Yeah.
are just starting? I don't have a GPA.
Okay. What do I recommend for freshmen who don't have a GPA, for example? Yeah, it's a very good question. Do you have a lab that you're working with?
No.
Okay. So obviously the first step is going to be getting a lab to work with. And even prior to that first step, for freshmen, my guideline is get your feet on the ground with respect to grades. Okay. So that may mean if you had really great grades in high school and you have, let's say, a fair amount of AP credit and you get through your first round of midterms and you make A's on all of them, I think you have a pretty good idea what you're getting into. If you have that and you haven't gotten all A's on your first midterms, then my advice is to wait at least a term. And not to say that you have to be a 4-point student to get these, that's not the case. But I'd like to see solid performance indicating you've made the adjustment to college before you do that, okay? So you need to do that. Once you've gotten that, then I recommend getting on the hunt for a mentor. And mentor is not as difficult to get as you might think it is. And as I say, I give a workshop on that. And then I would sit down with the mentor and do the application. So if we think about a URISC start application for freshmen and sophomores, for example, one of the reasons I make the deadline for that be in January is to give those freshmen a chance to get through their first term and get a mentor and put together an application maybe over Christmas break so that by early January they can seek funding. Make sense? Certainly. Yes? How much involvement is the mentor expected to do what? Okay, so the question is how much involvement is the mentor expected to have in the project? It's going to vary tremendously from discipline to discipline. I think what you will find in the sciences and engineering that most professors won't have a lot of direct involvement with things because they are managing a lab and not day-to-day involved. A few are, but most of them will not have that involvement in there. If you're working in the liberal arts, where you're working on a project in history, for example, that professor is cranking it every day. And while you may not be going head-to-head with the professor, you may be both doing analysis of stuff that are coinciding with each other. So it's going to vary an awful lot with this one. There's not an expectation of the in the proposal that the mentor is going to have a specific amount of involvement. This is more about the student's opportunity, and I think that the mentor has a pretty good idea about how to distribute that activity appropriately. Yeah.
What's the best way to go about approaching the professor saying, or we may not necessarily have to
Okay, so what's the best way about approaching a professor? I'm going to defer the answer to that until my next workshop. Okay. Do you have an immediate need right now? Are you looking for a professor right now?
I could wait.
Okay. So that gives me a plug for my next workshop, which will be held. I'm hoping to hold it 2 weeks from tonight. That will likely be held again in Gilfillan, since the last one pretty much was filling that. I think we'll probably do that again. And I have, if you will send me an email, I will send you a link to the PDF that I provided from that last thing. It has all the details about what I told students. It doesn't have a video of me telling them that. But I will be doing that and making a video of that in about 2 weeks. But if you'll send me an email, I will send you that the link to that PDF. Okay? Great. And as I said, I will make a PDF of tonight's presentation available in addition to this video. The video will be on YouTube probably in the next couple of days. And if you get on the listserv, I'll announce probably the next day or two how to get that PDF. Okay? If I can be of help to you, as I said, my job is to help you to be successful with these things. So I know the more I say that, the more my inbox is going to overflow. But I am happy to help you as best I can to do this. So if I can be of help to you in that process, please let me know. Okay? Okay, guys. Good luck. If you didn't get a handout, there's one up here. Come up and help yourself.